Hello everyone and welcome back. In this new lesson, we're going to learn how to implement a form draft pre-save functionality using reactive forms. The Reactive Forms API makes it very simple to implement this feature that can be very useful for the user. So how does this work exactly? Switching here to our form. So let's imagine that this is a longer form with a lot of controls that the user needs to fill in order to get a valid form. Let's go ahead and fill in valid values for all the form controls. We're going to click here on this checkbox and let's type in here some text. So now we have here a valid form. Now let's imagine that we would navigate away from this form. For example, again to the courses homepage. If we now go back to the create form page, then all the values that we have typed in have been lost. The problem is that in many situations, the navigation that the user did away from this form might not have been intentional. So it would be great to give to the user at least the option of saving a form draft locally here at the level of the browser, so that the user can navigate away from a form that is already filled, come back, and the values are still there, even though the user has not yet saved the values to the backend. So let's see how we're going to implement this feature using reactive forms. Going back here to our step 1 component, the first thing that we need is to somehow get notified whenever the form has a new valid value. Then, when we receive that new valid value, we are going to save it on the browser local storage for later. When the component gets initialized, we're going to check local storage to see if there is a value already filled in for the form. And if so, we are going to be initializing the form with the draft that was previously saved. Let's then see how we're going to implement this feature. The first thing that we're going to do is to subscribe here to the form value changes observable. In our case, we are only interested in form valid values, meaning that we only want to save a form draft if the user has already typed in a valid form value for step 1 of our multi-step form. So we are going to be receiving this value and we are going to be applying here the RxJS pipe syntax in order to filter out all the values that are not yet valid using the RxJS filter operator. We are not going to be doing the filtering based on the emitted value. Instead, we are going to check here the form valid flag. So only if the form is valid are we going to process it here in our draft saving logic. Let's now subscribe to this observable that only emits valid form values. We are going to receive here the valid value, and now all we have to do is to save it in local storage for later. Let's then call here the local storage API. We're going to call set item, and we're going to save this under the key step 1. Local storage only accepts strings, so let's go ahead and let's stringify here our valid form value. We can even simplify a bit here the implementation of our subscribe handler by removing here the curly brackets. So now we are saving our form draft to local storage. If the user navigates away from this component and the component gets destroyed, the valid form draft value is still available here on local storage. Let's say now that the user comes back here to our component. In that case, the first thing that we need to do at initialization time is to check local storage in order to see if there is a draft available. So let's access the same key step 1. If there is a draft value available, then what we want to do is to set the form with that initial value. And we can do so in the following way by using the form set value API. So set value is going to override all the values of the form. If we would like to modify only one field of the form, we could apply patch value. Patch value allows us to override just a couple of fields in the whole form and not the whole form value. In our case, we actually want to set the full form value to be the draft value. So let's then take the string that we got from local storage and let's parse it as valid JSON. We are then going to set it as the initial form value. Let's now try out this new draft form save functionality. So we're going to switch here to a larger window where we have the step 1 of our multi-step form available. Let's now go ahead and start typing in here valid values while making sure that our local storage is empty for our local host domain. Let's fill in here some valid values. Let's make sure to check this checkbox and type in here a valid value as well. So as we can see, as soon as we have typed a valid value in our form, it got immediately saved here to local storage. We can see here the value saved as a string. Now let's see what happens if we navigate away from this screen, for example by clicking here on the courses button. So if we do so, we are going to see that the value is still available here in local storage as expected. Let's now go back to the Create Course page. If we go back to that page, we are going to see that the form draft for step 1 is already filled in as expected. So the value was retrieved here from local storage and it was applied directly to the form using the setValue API. This is very useful in order to keep the multiple steps of the form saved as a draft while the user has not filled in the full draft yet. This allows the user to navigate away from the multi-step form and come back and still have several of the steps filled in. To complete this feature, we will need to make sure that whenever the user submits the whole form, that all the drafts are deleted from local storage. Notice that the stepper already has a similar functionality. For example, whenever we navigate through the multiple steps of the form, we are going to see that this value here is going to be kept in memory. Let's just adapt here several of the fields, and if we click here on the second step of our form and we fill in here a valid value and we come back to the previous step, we're going to see that the values that we have filled in are still available here in memory. This is the normal functionality of the stepper, but our draft saving functionality allows us to take this a step further. Not only the form values are going to be kept whenever we click between the multiple steps of the form, but they will also be kept whenever we navigate away from this course creation page. And with this, we have finished the implementation of our form draft save functionality. Let's now move to a more advanced part of our course. We are going to continue on the topic of reactive forms, and we are going to learn how to do custom form controls. Next, we're going to be building our own file upload form control compatible with Angular Forms that allows the user to upload a file to our backend, and the form control is going to be valid only when we have finished uploading a file with a given file extension successfully.